But even those consequences are, much less death, but the consequence of losing your house and car. How many of us are going to be willing to do that is a question to be asked. So civil disobedience is something that's extraordinarily serious, or it can be. And what Thoreau's response to that level of seriousness appears to be is that you must basically rely less on the world and rely more on yourself. And it's incredible that by and large, if you look at his life, the biographical facts of his life suggest that that's in fact what he did. He didn't have much. He wrote an entire chapter, the economy chapter of his book. The first chapter of his book was titled Economy, and where he's pushing the simple life, because outwardly things need to be simple because they're inwardly complex. On the physical level, the mundane level, you have a very simple life so that your spiritual level can be complex, dynamic, enjoyable internally. But nobody can bother you there. When he was locked up in jail, he said, they can't touch me. They cannot touch me. They're locking my body up, but they can't touch me. Again, it goes back to that issue of identity. Who are we? Where are we? It's a profoundly spiritual insight that all of Thoreau's writings really lead to and manifest.
I think that the American people are more concerned with their pocketbooks than they are about justice in this world.
How do you fashion a life where you can live as the particular person that you want yourself to be? It's a real big question. And it's not only a question like morally, but also physically. Do you want to surround yourself with, if you'll pardon the expression, crap? Do you want to do that? Or do you want to have a more simple life that's really a life where you're enjoying the inward dawn, to use one of Thoreau? He wrote a poem called The Inward Morning. And that, for Thoreau, the inward life was much, much more important than the outward life. The outward life was something that he knew he had to deal with. The economy has to be the first chapter of Walden. But the heart of Walden, the really important part, comes later with the exploration of the inward morning, to use, the inward journey, the inward voyage. It's all inward, it's all spiritual, it's all at that level of the higher law that really is important for Thoreau.
I first discovered Henry Thoreau about, I suppose, 10 years ago, so I came into him a little bit later in life than most people do. I went to Catholic school, so we didn't really read a lot of Transcendentalist literature.
Transcendentalism, a literary and philosophical movement asserting the existence of an ideal spiritual reality transcending the empirical and knowable through intuition. Transcendental. 1. Concerned with the intuitive basis of knowledge as independent of experience. 2. Beyond common thought or experience, mystical or supernatural.
I think the thing that I liked the best about him was he was transcendental, and it didn't bother him to talk about spiritual matters. But on the other hand, it didn't bother him to question the government. He was pretty much a troublemaker, and the town of Concord in his lifetime considered him kind of a weird guy because he didn't have any real job. He lived at home with mom and dad all of his life, except for the 2 years that he lived at Walden Pond and a couple of years with Ralph Waldo Emerson. He worked when he wanted to. He spent most of his days out walking around Concord, exploring the area, learning flowers, talking to fish. I guess in modern terms we would consider him a tree hugger. And that's what I liked about it. He really was in a lot of ways kind of like one of the first hippies. And I think that's what attracted me to him. Here was a guy who didn't care what people thought. He was living his life his own way. He said, most of what my neighbors believe to be good, I believe in my heart to be bad. And so he didn't fall for the idea that you had to be married and have 2.5 kids and have a house with a white picket fence to be happy. To him, the perfect day was wandering around in a swamp. And I like that idea, that he was going against all convention. I grew up in the 70s and was attracted for a long time to the punk rockers. I sang in a punk band for years. And so I kind of liked Thoreau's attitude of I don't care what people think. I'm going to dress the way I want. I'm going to think what I want. And if you don't like it, tough. That's not my problem, that's yours. And we're talking about a guy that was rebellious almost his entire life. He only lived to the age of 44, but right up to the age of 44, he was being rebellious and he didn't care what people thought. And I like that about him a lot.
The important aspect of the American people is that we are a nation of individuals. We all have our own individual rights. We have our individual thoughts. We have our individual freedoms. And it is up to us to live our lives the way that we see fit. We don't need the government to help us. In fact, more often than not, it seems that the government hinders our individual freedoms. And we have to make our government be aware of the fact that they need to respect the rights of the individuals, not just the white men, but the Negro men and the women as well. We are a nation of individuals, and the government needs to realize that.
In civil disobedience, a lot of people misinterpret, not a lot, but a few people, in my opinion, misinterpret what Thoreau's about by calling him an anarchist. Many anarchists say that Thoreau is sympathetic to our point of view, that he wants no government, when in fact, right at the very beginning of civil disobedience, he says, I do not ask at once for no government, I want at once a better government. So it's not that he's an anarchist, quite clearly. An anarchist is not, I don't think anarchists can claim Thoreau. What Thoreau is basically suggesting, and I think Thoreau's real view toward government is, he says that government is best which governs least, and followed out, that government is best which governs not at all. And then he puts a period at the end of that sentence, but really to understand what he's talking about, what you need to do, in a sense, if you don't mind me putting a parenthesis to Henry David Thoreau, what you need to do is say, you know, that government is best which governs not at all, in parentheses, because in such a government, all the citizens govern themselves. That's key. What Thoreau wants is self-governors. Everyone is their own king and governor, and Congress and Senate, and you do not need laws to oppress you, because you have a law inwardly that manifests itself in your conduct outwardly. So that's what Thoreau's idea of government is, not anarchism. It is basically, at the most individual level, self-government.
When I went to jail, it is not because I am against the government. I asked for not at once no government, I asked for at once a better government. I think by withholding my tax from the United States, I am at least hopefully letting them be aware of the kind of protests that we have as individuals here in the United States. I think that we need a government that respects the rights of the individual and bends to our will. Supposedly we are a democracy and a republic, so that those that we elect are to do what we say. But it seems that even though they think they have the majority and think that they have a mandate to rule how they see fit, very rarely do they do exactly what we want as a people. When you consider your conscience as how it reflects on the American government, it seems that if a man truly follows his conscience, for instance, in this war in Mexico, I know a goodly amount of people who are against the war in Mexico, yet the American government seems to consider them traitors because they do not support the government wholeheartedly. Ever since we have been expanding westward, there has been a saying, my country, right or wrong. And it seems that if you are against expansion to the west, if you are against the war in Mexico, if you are against the Constitution because it supports slavery, you are considered some sort of a traitor to the American government. And I am very much against that ideal. Following your conscience is much more important than following anything that the American government has to say. As an American citizen, the only obligation I have is to do what I think right at any time. And the reason I am thinking things that are right is because I am listening to that voice of God inside me and not paying attention to what President Polk or the federal government has to say. The character of the American people, it proves to me that there are at least some Americans who can accomplish quite a bit without any assistance or aid from the United States government. After all, the United States government should be doing the will of the people. The United States government has not expanded westward. The United States government has not built railroads. It has been the American people that have done those things, with very little help from the government itself.